Welcome to a special Hot Topics edition of Sports Center. I'm James Van Newton.
And I'm Ron Burgundy. And today we're discussing whether or not it's ethical to pay D1 athletes.
There are proponents both for and against the payment of Division I collegiate athletes. And with us here today, we have two very extraordinary women who have some experience on both sides of the issue. First, we have Lauren New, the NCAA Division I Commissioner.
And ESPN columnist Katie Cope. Before we jump into the debate, let's go over to James with some of the facts.
The chart that we have for you today shows the football revenue produced by each team and the total advertising revenue produced by each team. Proponents for the payment of players would go by the numbers to say that if the University of Texas is generating $87 million per year based on football revenue, the athletes are, just getting a scholarship. Why would we not be able to pay these players if they're generating that much revenue for the school? We've got teams from the Big 12, the SEC, the Big 10. Even my own alma mater, Texas A&M University, is generating almost $40 million of football revenue per year, and the football players aren't receiving a dime of this money. Some would even go as far to say that this is a huge exploitation of labor. Now let's go to Ron with another perspective on the topic.
Pictured here is Jared Zabransky, the cover boy of NCAA Football 2008. Now some of you may be thinking that he received quite a bit of the revenues that were associated with this video game, but in reality Boise State was likely to have gotten most of it. Despite the fact that this is Jared Zabransky and it is all his stats and all of his athletic achievements that led to him being on the cover, Boise State is likely to get the majority, if not all, of the revenues associated with it.
Now let's get into the debate. First, we're going to go to Lauren, the NCAA Commissioner, who is against the payment of players.
Next, we're going to go to Katie, who is in support of the payment of players. And the question we pose is the scholarship alone enough payment?
We here at the NCAA firmly believe that the scholarship is enough payment. These student athletes are students first and then athletes, so they're getting their education paid for, which should be more than enough. In fact, 400,000 students go pro in something other than sports, so we firmly believe that the scholarship is enough.
After hearing the Commissioner's thoughts, let's send it over to Katie for hers.
So I believe that the scholarship is not enough, and while they do provide tuition, books, room and board, things of that nature, there still is a $2,700 gap per student per year that is occurring.
So Katie, I heard you mention that the scholarship covers tuition, room and board, but yet you still said that there's a gap occurring. What makes up this gap?
So this gap that you're asking about is includes things such as, everybody needs gas for their car, they need supplies, and when people live off campus, other things of that nature, clothes even. So this gap is about $2,700 per athlete per student. And I believe an easy way to solve this, because this could and should be fixed, is it's about $250 per student per month to help close this gap. And this is an easy achievable number that can be covered by the school's athletic programs.
Okay, Katie, so you've explained a little bit about the gap and what it entails, and you've said that the schools could pay $250 a month. Well, if we go back to our previous numbers that we showed here, looking at the revenue, it seems that Texas, making $87 million a year, could easily pay more than $250 a month, whereas somebody like A&M only making half that much money might not be able to afford that much money. So is there going to be a cap set on how much money the schools can provide, or is it going to be mandated?
So clearly, I know that Texas does have more money than A&M, but it should be based on the cost of living for the student athlete to live in the area. So say a student athlete in New York is clearly going to be, it's going to be more trying to have money to pay for things up there than say living in Texas. But there definitely should be a cap in order to help with recruiting, so that there's not the enticement and promise of more money. Like Texas could promise, oh, we'll give you $10,000 a year, versus A&M, who may follow the rules and only pay the $250 a month. There definitely needs to be a cap, but it should definitely be based on the cost of living.
Hypothetically, if we were to pay the athletes, how would that affect Title IX implications? For a little discussion on that, let's toss it over to the Commissioner.
Title IX is always a big issue when it comes to the NCAA. Let's take a closer look at Title IX to see how it will affect paying players. Title IX basically stipulates that funding for men's and women's sports has to be equal. Some of the most important provisions are that the equipment and supplies have to be even for the teams, and that the provisions of the locker rooms, practice, and competitive facilities have to be equal. With that being said, that means that this $2,700 cap would have to be paid to everybody, including football players who generate all the revenue, along with volleyball players. All women's sports would have to be paid the same as the men's sports.
Okay, Lauren, now that we've gotten your take on Title IX, the fact that if we're going to make this work, we're going to have to pay everybody an equal amount, then a question that keeps tumbling through my head is, what is this going to do to the amateur status of collegiate athletes? Because I know we have a lot of rules on whether or not they can go on to the professional league after a certain number of collegiate years. Now that we're paying them, are they considered professionals now, or are they going to have options to go to the NFL versus staying in college? How's that going to pan out?
This is one of the NCAA's main arguments against the paying of players. These are students and they need to maintain their amateur status, and so once you start paying them, they become professionals. And where do you draw the line? Any amount of money that you give them makes them professional athletes.
Well, we're not necessarily proposing to pay the players. We're just trying to help bridge the gap between what the scholarships offer and what it takes for a college student to make it and live through 4 to 5 years in college as a student athlete.
Okay, Katie, so now we can see that you're really for just bridging this $2,700 gap. Now another thing that has me thinking is, is this gap only to the scholarship players, or are we going to have to pay players that are just every player on the roster, even the ones that are just walk-on athletes that receive no scholarship money or any kind of help?
Well, in order to make this work and to follow Title IX along with other NCAA rules, we would have to pay every player on the roster the same amount, and it would be every team would get paid the same amount of money. Now, the overall number per team would differ because clearly, football teams have more players than, say, a swim team or a soccer team, but each player would receive the same amount of money no matter if they were on scholarship or if they were a walk-on.
From what we've heard today, we can see that this is overwhelmingly a hot topic of debate among many people, and we'd personally like to thank both Katie and Lauren for having this nice discussion with us today. Now we're going to leave you with two questions that we've been thinking about as we've done this discussion today. Zach, you want to hit them up with the first one?
So, a lot of people feel that even if we start bridging this gap of $2,700, I mean, even if we pay these players, is that going to stop the recruiting violations? And, I mean, should you even have scholarships, or should you just give a straight amount to anyone? I mean, these are really far-reaching questions, and we're just going to leave them open-ended.
On behalf of ESPN, I'm James Van Newton.
And I'm Ron Burgundy. You stay classy, College Station.